this thing.
This song is dedicated to all my sons and daughters through the four.
Yes, indeed. Of course, a pleasant good night to all and sundry. Well, you realize that we're getting a little technical problems this program or this night, but that being as may, Joshua is not with me tonight because we were experiencing some technical issues, so I decided that I will go it alone tonight. But more importantly, that I had to switch systems in order to of course bring tonight's program because of that level of commitment. I don't think we will be on Facebook, but we certainly are on YouTube tonight, and I'm seeing it in the monitor that we have in studio. So I'm trying to get rid of the background, but I've not been successful so far. But we have a bumper program for you anyway, and we will continue. Of course, in the background, you will hear the music of Ras Shorty Eye, the late Ras Shorty Eye, and that is in keeping with, of course, the theme tonight, which is, of course, the price of progress. And having regard to the fact that in contemporary times, in modern times, in present-day situations in Trinidad and Tobago, the fight against drugs clearly has come to our doorsteps in the form of the military assets of the United States. And as a consequence of that, I think it will be remiss of us if we did not have a program dedicated to that aspect of it. There's another thing that I want to tell you, that we may have some challenges with respect to the phone. Let me see if we have the phone organized. It appears that, yeah, that we have it up and running. So we shouldn't have too much of a problem with the phone tonight, in spite of the challenges that, as I said, have beset us just before the start of the program. But that being as it may, let me say, of course, a wonderful evening to all and sundry, East, West, North, South, Central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web. A pleasant good day to you. I'm trying to get rid of that background and get a much more less dynamic and one that is more constant rather than the constant shifting and so on. But until I reach that stage, let me just thank all of you for being patient and for understanding the situation, having, of course, explained it. Let me see. All right, good. I have something here that might work. Right, good. We'll use this one for the time being. Yes, indeed. But of course, once again, a pleasant good night to all and sundry, East, West, South, Central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web. A pleasant good day to you. Yes, the topic tonight, of course, progress. But let me put you in another good mood in terms of progress. So I think we would not be doing justice to, of course, the late King Austin if we did not, of course, bring this one as well. Yes, indeed, progress. That will be the topic tonight.
Today, when I look around in the world, what do I see?
Once again, we may not have the benefit of Facebook tonight. We'll have to make some adjustments because we brought in a substitute, if you want to call it that, system to make sure that we have tonight's program. We'll have to check the what I consider to be the original one for whatever glitch that might have set to it. But what was happening is that the music in the background would have been cutted or delayed to the point of discomfort, and I thought we should change it up tonight and see whether or not we can get some of the information we wanted to play prior to tonight, play like the SSA episode where we highlighted a number of issues that was raised and given to and in the presence of the last administration, but it did not respond. And of course, but whilst record-breaking murders were taking place, 22, 23, 24, and indeed, of course, we have seen a drastic reduction in 25, largely because of the presence of the new government, clearly, and that what we had in terms of a frequency going now is that transition period to the new administration. One has to be realistic and say, well, in all certain terms, that one expects that at the beginning of next year, 2026, that the impact of what the or put another way, the impact of the presence of the new government will certainly manifest itself as far as murders are concerned. Because that's what we are concerned with. We are concerned with. After all, it was the current Prime Minister that said that what is the sense? What is the sense of making all the money in the world and you can't live to spend it or to enjoy it? Alright? So let's hear progress and then we will go strictly into the topic tonight.
I see consciousness as great as today we live recklessly. Money make egos inflate and thereby create a turbulent state. I see a struggle between the sexes, new hang-ups and old complexes. Now the question is, right in context, what shall be next? I've already seen this would have come divided between race, color, creed, and class. And some of the things the scripture predicts should fully come to pass. Soil that wouldn't bear children, making children to be a part of this growing mass. And I ask, if this is progress, how long will it last?
Yes, indeed, of course. Welcome back, or should I say welcome. Trying to get some information in the background as well as we were speaking, but as the music was playing, but certainly that has not been the case. But that being as it may, we cannot help that. Let me play the SSA piece in the background now that we have a more healthy, I should say, media player to really articulate what we were trying to share with you a couple nights ago. After all, of course, it's already Thursday, and of course, tomorrow night I will not be around, but I would want to make certain that you benefit from the SSA report, as I feel it is crucial for all of us, of course, information, edification, and awareness as to what they said, because I was always skeptical about the SSA and its efficacy, and whether or not we need a CIA or the Russian version of a spy agency in Trinidad and Tobago. But certainly when I got hold of that report, which was since 2023, I realized that it has some significant value, and that, of course, that level of intelligence ought to find itself in the actual law enforcement, let's say, establishment, apparatus, mechanism, or system in order to repel the amount of crime and criminality that became very commonplace, very commonplace during the Rowley Stuart Young, as compendious as it was, as short as it was. I talk about Stuart Young here, administrations, because of course they give you 2 lame duck administrations for the price of 1, and I can tell you we will not want to have another experience like that again in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm waiting for the clip to download, and when it does, I will try to play it so that you have an appreciation. In the meantime, let's test the phone. The phone line is open, 337-6940, 337-6940. Remember, most likely we are only on YouTube at this point in time. I have had difficulty because we have brought in a new system, not to engage, I should say, the Facebook platform as yet. But I remember the Facebook platform will be, at any rate, Alfred John, not corridor transformation or anything else, but Alfred John. If you go corridor, well, we have not been able to rectify that hack that we got several years ago. But that being as it may, we will not, of course, flounder. We will not, of course, be deterred. We will not be in any way engaged in any kind of trepidation or fear that we are unable to bring the material that we believe is crucial for you to the fore. So that particular video is now being engaged by the audio player that we have in studio. I'm seeing a similar problem to that of which we had before. So I don't know. It might be something that we hooked up to the system that may now be the problem. You see, you have to do the tweaking and so on, and you have to experiment and so on in order
Threats to TNT national
here we go.
security. SSA warned about Venezuela-Guyana/U.S. tension since 2023 by Reatative Express. As far back as 2023, the Strategic Services Agency, SSA, drew attention to imminent challenges implicating Trinidad and Tobago that were lurking on the horizon because of increasing regional tensions involving the United States, Venezuela, and Guyana. The SSA's annual report for 2023 warned that these regional tensions between the U.S., Venezuela, and Guyana would inevitably affect and influence the CARICOM region's status as a zone of peace, and that it could also impact the Dragon gas field deal with Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, as well as other existing and future Trinidad and Tobago Venezuela energy agreements. The SSA report, which was tabled in the House of Representatives on Friday, also anticipated that growing Venezuela-Guyana/U.S. tensions could lead to an increased rate of piracy and kidnappings for ransom.
Yes, that wasn't supposed
as well
to be
as
opposed.
increased threats to energy security and infrastructure. The escalation in the territorial issues relating to the Essequibo region may further compound the issues affecting Trinidad and Tobago's national security, particularly as it relates to maritime insecurity and illegal migration. The report stated, the continued smuggling of illegal firearms and ammunition, mainly from the U.S., and the increasing demand in drug-consuming countries will compound the crime situation with increasing levels of violence in Trinidad and Tobago as criminals compete in the underworld economy. The report recommended that the government of Trinidad and Tobago continue to encourage a diplomatic solution to the Venezuela-Guyana dispute and bolster TNT maritime security assets in its jurisdiction. The SSA report also cautioned that growing global cocaine markets would increase the risk of organized crime groups operating in and out of Trinidad and Tobago. Consequently, Trinidad and Tobago's role as a transshipment point may gain further significance with the following: increased collaborations between criminal gangs and the strengthening of
Yes, that wasn't supposed to happen. We have some more material that is on that.
cross-border criminal networks in narcotics and firearms trafficking, resulting in increased firearm-related crimes and homicides. The report also telegraphed that illegal firearm suppliers seeking mechanisms to reduce risks and costs associated with cross-border smuggling may develop locally 3D printed metal weapons and ammunition, causing further proliferation of firearm usage. Gang culture is escalating. The report identified a dual-front attack on the society from the tensions on external and internal fronts, namely the regional tensions and the gangs. Trinidad and Tobago's proximity to Venezuela and Guyana makes it a convenient and strategic location for the smuggling of cocaine and other narcotics, fueling a rise in gang violence and an influx of illegal guns. In 2023, the continued nexus between gangs and the issuing of legitimate contracts as well as gang territorial disputes resulted in the use and application of extreme violence, along with an alarming trend of extorting businesses for protection money. TNT gangs continue to control access to state resources in the community, and this includes social services and employment. The control of the gangs, their access to resources, and their displays of wealth and influence contribute to their persistence in impoverished areas and to the spread of a gang subculture within the society. This spread has intensified with gangs' expansion into the music industry. Further, Trinidad music is inciting and intensifying existing levels of violence expressed by youth throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The perceived disrespect between some gang members and leaders infused with the lyrical content of Trinidad music continues to manifest through the more devious expressions of violence and murders. The report stated, the report noted that Trinidad and Tobago's major gangs were increasing in size and influence, and that smaller unaligned hybrid gangs, which are technologically savvy, and which engage in diverse criminal enterprises simultaneously, were also increasing in quantity. Incarcerated gang leaders continue to sanction criminal activities, including targeted killings, narcotics ventures, and extortion from prisons, which contributed to the worsening crime landscape in 2023. The report stated. It said the state had sought to reduce the impunity by which incarcerated gang leaders can influence criminal activity from the confines of prison. Increasingly observed in 2023 was the proliferation and emergence of hybrid gangs and the amalgamation of some gangs for economic gain. The gang culture in Trinidad and Tobago is escalating and becoming more entrenched across several communities, posing a severe threat throughout the country, the report noted. The report said the threat level associated with criminal gangs in 2023 was high, with the escalation in violent crimes attributed to vicious gangs fighting increasingly over a range of criminal markets, particularly drug blocks, geographic spheres of influence for robberies and extortion, and social media influence associated with the music industry and the Trinidad genre. Increase in illegal migration from Venezuela. The report also noted the law enforcement community had been penetrated. Another challenge has been the reports of collusion between a recalcitrant minority of military and law enforcement personnel and the gamut of organized criminal groups and criminal gangs. Our agency continuously provides intelligence advice to our external stakeholders to mitigate these challenges, in keeping with our legislative mandate, the report stated. It noted serious crimes that increased in 2023 as compared to 2022 included fraud, larceny of motor vehicles, rape, incest, and sexual offenses, robberies, serious indecency, and wounding and shootings. The report noted illegal migration, primarily from Venezuela, will continue to be a significant regional concern, placing further stress on the capacity of the Trinidad and Tobago border management systems, including the Coast Guard, Defense Force, and Immigration. The report said law enforcement recorded increased incidents of human smuggling and child prostitution operations in the Caribbean. In addition to social conditions that continue to fuel northbound migration, officials noted the presence of human trafficking operations by Chinese nationals operating in the Bahamas and the increased movement of nationals from Asia, particularly from China and India, Africa, and Central American countries into the region. It said it predicted there would be increased incidents of child/human trafficking into the region as vulnerable persons attempt to flee countries in socio-political decline. The report also warned about the increased use of cyber attacks as a destabilization tactic against state agencies and private sector companies, resulting in the theft of confidential information and disruption of essential sectors. It also predicted the increased adoption of artificial intelligence by malign actors to execute their agendas. Trinidad and Tobago's high internet penetration and high digitization drive increase its vulnerability to malicious actors owing to the lack of laws and mechanisms to prevent and/or mitigate cyber attacks. Thus, increased attacks against private and state institutions are likely, the report stated. It added that the virtual space may provide fertile ground for gangs, violent extremist groups, and other potential threat actors to propagate anti-state messaging, engage in recruitment, and
Yes, indeed. That is a report of the SSA as the notification
coordinate criminal activities.
Screen
on the issue of cyber attacks, its set of concern was the fact that there were over 200 cyber incidents throughout Trinidad and Tobago reported to the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team. Trinidad and Tobago faced several high-profile attacks, with authorities stating that the majority of ministries and state agencies remain highly vulnerable to cyber attacks. the report observed. On the issue of illicit fentanyl trafficking, the report said information suggests regional organized crime groups, OCGs, are largely not involved in this criminal economy. However, OCGs may attempt to exploit this market, resulting in new challenges for states, including Trinidad and Tobago. Based on observed trends with ketamine, Trinidad and Tobago will likely experience increased trafficking of both illegal fentanyl and fentanyl diverted from medical sources, the report said. The report said in 2023, 184 actionable intelligence reports were shared with stakeholders, and an additional 1,546 intelligence reports were produced and shared. It said based on information provided to the agency by the TPS and the TDF, intelligence information provided led to 89 people being arrested, 34 charges against people, 6 criminal organizations were disrupted, and 24 serious/organized crime ventures were disrupted. In the area of cyber risks, the report noted that during 2023, the agency successfully deployed equipment to expand its interception of communication capabilities and assisted in the deployment of cell phone jammers in the maximum security prison.
Yes, indeed, people. I don't think you need to hear more than that, because clearly that information would have been sent
Threats to TNT National
Oh, let me just
Security.
silence the background.
SSA warned about Venezuela, Guyana.
Yes, let us really get serious here. Let us get serious. This report was available to the last administration and could have, therefore, if they had any serious intent to addressing crime and criminality and the plethora of other socio-economic and psycho-cultural issues that the report spoke to and still speaks to, because I'm sure that it is somewhere in the ministry, what we call now Homeland Security, and of course that of Border Security, coming together to address the national security, both internally and externally in Trinidad and Tobago. And the question has to be, what did Rowley and they do? Because we cannot see anything at all, except, of course, billions of dollars were expended, and then we had a narcoleptic, a total nincompoop, ultimately at the helm of the national security operations in Trinidad and Tobago, the Ministry of National Security, in the form of both the former National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines, and of course later down under the ephemeral presence of Stuart Young, we had, of course, Gonzales, or they call him sometimes because of some ephemeral disposition, but I'm not going to go there. There's some, not ephemeral, but feminine position that sometimes he's associated with, because, and there is good reason for it. So I am not talking here just by out of any kind of malice, but the fact is that the report and of the matter that was in the court, where Gonzales went as witness for somebody in Wassa that was using a vehicle unauthorized, and his statement was debunked, was said to be unreliable, and therefore it was not probative evidence to suggest that the person who was accused of unauthorized use of Wassa's vehicle could be relied upon by the court. So that is not something that is not well known to the public. Yes, indeed. Sorry about that. I had to draw attention to the fact that there are some people that were making a little too much noise in the background. We don't want to interrupt, of course, your program because, of course, you get it as late as this, and we want to make sure that we do it in a way that would do justice all around. But let me say this. Let us get back to that report because it is significant. You see, because it is so comprehensive, it's so all-embracing and embracing that if followed, if heed was paid, to be forewarned, they say, is a very advantageous position anyone can have. Because in war, there is something called intelligence. And what does that bring to the table of the combatants? It is a very practical, what I consider to be tool that is used because it tells where the position of the enemy, it tells the strength of the enemy, it tells what next in terms of a series of probable and real attacks that may be engaged. And we saw that with the Ukraine-Russian scenario, where whilst, of course, many optimists were saying that Russia was mobilizing merely as a defense mechanism because they have a good relationship with Belarus, and so they were mobilizing tanks of artillery and, of course, military assets almost to encircle Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in the early days. But the Americans were saying, no, our intelligence say that Russia was going to invade and intended to invade Ukraine. And that is exactly what transpired. I'm just making the point to show the importance of intelligence and how you can, as a result of that information, prepare for any onslaught. Well, in this case, whilst we're not at war with any country, we are certainly at war with those who are willing to infiltrate Trinidad and Tobago externally and internally, and they wreak havoc on our young people and those who are vulnerable, susceptible, and they may be easily influenced and so engaged in activities that are antisocial, as we see with respect to the cocaine community, whether it be a consumer, the end product user, or the person who is the middleman, or the person who is supposed to be producing it outside of Trinidad and Tobago, and those who are engaged, of course, in the transportation thereof. It's very important that we understand. And if the SSA provided information like that to the Rowley administration in 2023, so no way Rowley was contemplating resigning, of course, until Trump came on board, because Trump, he realized, have familiarized and studied him, just as I have, a bloody coward, near the well, a conman, a rapscallion, and I've always said, and I continue to say, a rapist and pedophile. That's what Rowley brought to the table in Trinidad and Tobago. That is a fact, and we cannot escape that. But the point is that you had 1.5 million people to take care of. Rowley, PNM, Penalou Beckles, and all of the other, what I consider to be obscurantists, and of course anti-Trinidad and Tobago elements that found themselves under the umbrella of the PNM, claiming to be government of Trinidad and Tobago, when in fact they were really and truly an amalgam of and settled under one umbrella called the PNM, that in effect has been and is a criminal enterprise. That's not waste time. You see, you have to be angry. And I want to tell people, of course, I know people are trying to get in, and I don't know, I have engaged, but as I said, it's a system that we had to move into because of the inability of the previous one to play what we just played there. And I thought it was so important because the report of the SSA has been so comprehensive and so all-embracing and so impacting that I want you to know that no way you could consider the PNM as an entity deserving of even political or electoral consideration. We have local government elections coming up. And whether they like it or not, all of these silo type utterances that they are making, in other words, they continue with the silo rationality. And when I say silo, I mean that they bring things to the national consciousness and the national table totally independent of and oblivious to the fact that government is not just a continuum, but it is a complex network of interconnected systems, rules, as well as mechanisms to ensure the smooth operation of the society. I always like to reference the sociological position of the functionalist sociologists. You see, the functionalist sociologists see society as a body, a human being, in the biological sense, and that the heart, while of course important, cannot function without the other functioning organs and systems in the body. You cannot say that you have the heart, but you could do without the eyes, you could do without the nose, you could do without the ears, you could do without the mouth, you could do without the liver, you could do without the spleen, you could do without the kidneys, you could do without the limbs, both upper and lower. That's the point I am making. And therefore, because society is an interconnected weave or network designed at the end of the day not only to keep the society alive as all the various systems of the body come together to keep this pile, if you want to call it that, or this accumulation of flesh, blood and bone and tissue together, is the same thing in the society. And the government has the fundamental and the at times sole responsibility to make sure that the society is healthy, wealthy, and functions in a manner that is credible to all that are within. And how would one say that Lennox Smith is right or wrong? Well, if that was not so, then you wouldn't have a Ministry of National Security. If that was not so, you wouldn't have a Ministry of Agriculture. If that was not so, you wouldn't have a Ministry of Industry and Commerce. If that was not so, you would not have a Ministry of Community Development. If that was not so, you wouldn't have a Ministry of Culture. If that was not so, you wouldn't have a Ministry of Sports. If that was not so, you wouldn't have a Ministry of Youth. If that was not so, you wouldn't have those other state enterprises, whether it's the East Port of Spain Development Company, whether it's NEDCO, whether it's NITCO, whether it be Unicut, and we can go on and on. That's the point I'm making. So the government has that responsibility to keep the society healthy, wealthy, alive, functioning, and of course with very little disruption. what we have seen is a massive display of abdication of responsibility by the PNM. They could, of course, pat themselves on the shoulder and give themselves, of course, unmeritorious credit, and then they will take you on a nostalgic past a time when the Trinidad and Tobago was on the journey of evolution, and no one expected that journey that ostensibly and in all practicality began in 1962 when we got our independence. I say so because to a large degree we no longer was dependent on the colonial master, the British crown, if you want to call that, or the British government. No longer. I see that something has gone wrong in the background there. So we have that from time to time. We are going to get these glitches from time to time. All right, I see it has returned. All right, then it has gone again. So we have to. I know that I am doing things on my own. Let me see if I could treat with that. Let me see if I could treat with that. All right, it's back. Earlier we were getting that and then it stopped, but now I've seen it's going and coming. So I may have to, of course, conclude a bit early tonight because of that. As I said, we have a new system that we have put in place, but you know, modern technology is such that it's so sensitive that at times it's so sensitive that you have to do tweaking almost on a daily basis. And of course, Murphy's Law applies in such circumstances where, of course, if something has to go wrong, it will at the worst possible time, as you saw just now, when, of course, suddenly the system simply did not recognize or projected the background that I changed to earlier, just to make sure that we have a program tonight. But let me try to be as conclusive as possible and to generate the gist of what I'm saying, knowing full well that there may be an issue with respect to the phone, but I'm saying that the phone is on. Somebody will have to test it. I don't know if we could do it in studio. Somebody tests and call in to find out whether or not the studio we are getting outside calls. I would appreciate that. I'm talking this way. It would appear to be you, but really and truly I'm talking to those that are still here tonight waiting for the completion of this exercise. So if somebody in studio could test and call 337-6940 to make certain that the phone is up and running, because we did do some changes just before the advent or the beginning of the program. But let me get back on track to the whole question of progress. So yes, the PNM will claim that they got independence for Trinidad and Tobago, and that all of the, or most of the roads that we see or we travel on would have been by them, and of course electricity and all of the other things that is associated with modern Trinidad and Tobago, or indeed some say that we are backward. They call us a banana republic at times. So it depends, of course, on your perspective and how you see the development of Trinidad and Tobago. But the consensus is that with the amount of resources, financial, that that Trinidad and Tobago would have been exposed to over the decades of independence, we ought to be considered and considering ourselves the Singapore of the West, or indeed the Dubai of the West. You know, Dubai is in the Middle East. But that being as it may, we must not allow those who have been given the responsibility, the awesome task of moving Trinidad in this independent era and into as well the Republican era, because independence meant we still had some vestige of a colonial past. We had a governor general, but when we became a republic in 1976, yes, and I think in September, in fact. So we are in that process in terms of celebration, but in terms of actual in terms of development, the PNM was around even then, but we cannot. All right, okay. I was given the signal that we are not getting any telephone communication, so I understand. So, all right. So, all right. So it means that I'll have to do some additional work to get the telephone working, but certainly you won't have the benefit of tomorrow, because tomorrow, of course, is my night off. But certainly on Saturday, and we will talk about all of those things that you wanted to talk about tonight. I was just informed that the phone is not working, so whilst we change up the system a bit, we did not focus on the telephone. So, I want to confess that, because I had to do it myself in order to make sure that we have a program tonight. So, as the old saying goes, it's better half a loaf is better than none at all. And therefore, if tonight you're getting half a loaf, some may say is a quarter loaf, but the fact is that you get a piece of the bread. So I want to say that, of course, and it could be, as usual, always available for not just delayed, but convenient consumption when in your quiet moments people will look back at it tonight. Look for Corridor Transformation on the 18th of September, and then, of course, do what is required. Yes, we are, as I said, in the prelude to, of course, the celebrations of our Republican status. And you know, one of the things that has emerged in recent times is that in order to give significance to Republic Day, the whole question of awards for national service in different fields, Chaconia, etc., and the Order of Trinidad and Tobago, something that Joshua was struggling with some time ago, but I'm sure that he would have gotten over that by now and committed to memory. And if not, of course, well, we just do it again until that scenario occurs. But the point is that these awards will now be held on Republic Day. So one expects that even though it is not a holiday, as that of Independence Day, the Republic Day will mark, of course, the issuance of awards to nationals who would have done service to Trinidad and Tobago as the authorities would have recognized. So I just interject that to be part and parcel, whilst it may not be part in totality of the toxology or the flow of the discussion, but certainly it is something that is significant and must be mentioned. So the PNM will take credit for that, but that is credit that if they were not in government, another group of persons who would have found themselves in that position would have had to do. That is why I found it very ridiculous and very, what I consider to be obtuse, stupid, that the PNM will constantly make these, I shouldn't say revelations, but those statements that are totally osseous, totally irrelevant. If you were given the mantle of responsibility, having regard to the state of development and maturity of the society at the time, and Eric William formed this organization, and then, of course, the population having, of course, gained national franchise or the ability to vote and to determine who. And while there may have been challenges to the PNM over the years, the fact of the matter is that if the DLP was in government, they would have had to deal with those multiple factors that the government is supposed to be responsible for, as espoused earlier, whether it be agriculture, education, health, etc., all of that. So to boast of a boast that is really is not a boast. It's ridiculous. And I'm being generous to them because it's totally asinine. And while we understand the political connotations and the political benefits of such statement, it cannot be relied upon for future electability and managing the affairs of the country, as we have seen after the 28th of April. And as we have seen, as indicated by the current leader, because they have a sense of history, especially when they were soundly beaten at the polls, and they will never forget 1986. They will never forget 1995. They will never forget, well, they don't mention 2000, but they got licks in 2000 as well. Pandey got back into office with the majority, but of course, as you know, the opposition have a tendency to shoot themselves in the foot, having gained government. But if the opposition, as we know it then, and as we knew it before the 28th of April, was in charge of this country, as long as the PNM was, or equally, let's say that 30 years, 40 years, and you had 2020, at minimum, bet your bottom dollar, Trinidad and Tobago would have been much more advanced, because the fresh and the creativity and the foresightedness of the opposition over the years that they have been in office is unparalleled compared to the PNM. So PNM forte, their strength as far as they're concerned is their past. Why? Because you had nothing to compare it with. You had nothing to compare. But after 1986, there would have been comparison. And that is why today, if the PNM was in government, we would have been facing property tax. We would have been facing, of course, that revenue authority, and that would have been depended upon by them if they were in government, because of the mismanagement of the what? Of the over $12 billion that Rowley met in 2015, US are talking about, in reserves. In reserve. And the abuse of the Heritage and Celebration Fund that they met at over $5 billion US in 2015 as well. And then they have developed this NAG, this propensity, this disposition to create narratives and try to project it as logical and common sense and beneficial to Trinidad and Tobago, to again suggest that they are the ones who have a monopoly on how Trinidad and Tobago should be run. Well, if that is in fact so, well, not only should they not be in office, or put another way, they have to explain why they're out of office today, right now, and have been so for several periods in the electoral and political history of Trinidad and Tobago. But more importantly, they have to account as to why Trinidad and Tobago today is in such a sorry state. And they will have to account to the fact, or for the fact, that they met, as I said, 12 billion in reserve, enough, and international benchmark and standards will suggest that if you have 7 months of import, your economy is fairly stable or in a good place. Well, they had over 12 months of import in 2015 when they came in to office. When they came into office. But I was making the point as well that they have developed this nag, this propensity, this proclivity to make square peg in round hole logic and project it out to the population, somehow believing that we are that foolish to absorb, as if we are, or put another way, if we were a sponge, they were prepared to abuse its absorbency. Yeah, if the people of Trinidad and Tobago were a sponge, the People's National Movement, Rowley and they were prepared, of course, to abuse its absorbency for whatever liquid, whether it's water or some other item that could be absorbed. Why am I saying that? Because with respect to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, we saw the most spectacular display of that square peg in round hole logic or illogic, depending on your perspective. I like to say it is totally asinine, foolish, dunderheaded, rock-headed, simply stupid to tell a population, listen, when everybody knew that the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, when they got into office in 2015, was about $5 billion US for convenience and for the argument that I'm advancing in terms of the level of stupidity that they exhibit, but somehow projecting it onto the population, believing that the population is stupid like them. So they dipped into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. We don't know how many times per se, but we know it's more than 2 times. We know it's more than 2 times. We will know, of course, with the advent of the 2026 budget presentation to be read for the first time, I say first time, by the current Minister of Finance, Dave Tanku, and for this new government that is just over 100 days old. Here it is, they met $5 billion US dollars in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. They dipped into it at least 2 times. I'm just trying to be conservative here and not to fall victim to their propagandists and their propaganda, or who would say, like when Lee said, the mothball train 1 LNG plant. When Lee said, I think it was mothball for $800 million, Rowley and them jump up and say, no, it's not 800 million, it's 400 million. Now just imagine that. He said 800 million, they said no, it's 400 million. And that by itself, for the common person looking and analyzing, will say, all right, okay, so there is an adjustment to be made. But the PNM is not that kind of organization to leave that as an adjustment, because the argument has been, why would you spend, whether it's 800 million or 400 million, on a mothball, a facility to maintain it that has no possibility of bringing a return to Trinidad and Tobago or going into profit, because those who were responsible for supplying that facility with the gas that will make it functional said that it is not economical, and they're not wasting any time in, of course, providing that with any gas, simply because we do not have enough, and it doesn't even have enough for train 2, 3, and 4. But yet still, the government total control of train 1 by this time, because the other investors, whether it's BP and other upstreamers or players in the industry, abandoned that. They spent 400 million, adjusted from 800 million, and then make the 400 million, that's the point I'm making, the 400 million the issue. No, or we can say 800 is 400, and then they will harp on the 400 when the issue really is, why spend money at all on it? Whether it's $1 or $2, far less for 400 million. But that is how they generate these square peg and round hole asinine statements and logic, so that all they are concerned with is the ability to stay in government, and then of course make these what I consider to be hyperbolic, stupid statements that really and truly is nestled in the ability to speak as all human beings have, and therefore engage in what is called semantics. Semantics. The issue was and still is, Rowley and Stuart Young and Penelope Beckles, is that why it is you spend $400 million on something that you will never get a return on, and all of the advice, like Petrotrin, when they closed it down, all of the advice was that leave that alone, that train one, and in the case of Petrotrin, do not close down there was no report saying to close down the oil refinery. None whatsoever. So they come up with these phantasmagorical, somebody said that this morning on the ground report, and of course attributed the elasticity of my vocabulary to that particular caller making that statement. Well, if it is that I am able to be of value to callers and the people who we project this program to, well then, so be it. So be it. But the point I am making is that the argument was, and continues to be, why you spend, if you say it's not 800 million, all right, why you spend 400 million? But they will harp on the 400 to say that somebody dishonest, and all of that kind of shenanigan, you know, all of that, without addressing the fundamental and basic issue or question, why it is that you spend any kind of money at all on train one. We will find out, I'm sure, in due course, whether in this budget or future what I consider to be revelations by the present administration. After all, they are in charge. The UNC Coalition of Interest, we are in charge. Yes, I say we because love is part of the Coalition of Interest, my party. But I want to get back to taking up that example and superimposing it on the Heritage and Civilization Fund, so as to generate the parallel, the similarity. And what is that? Here it is that they agreed that the 5 billion mark is a commonality. Everybody agrees. The PNM agreed in government that they met 5 billion there. Of course, they will not tell you that the UNC met half of that when they got into office in 2010. They will not go there, but they will say that they met 5. And guess what? They dipped into it at least 2 times for our argument. We know it's more, but we will find out the true number in due course. But I am making the point of the way that they manage the affairs of the country in this slipshod, deceptive, misinformation, disinformation, illogic, as I say, square peg and wrong hole logic, and want people to trust them and want people to see that as good management, as they are saying even all now. Even all now. I mean, it's a joke. It is, people, it's a joke. So, here it is. When one expects that Imsbert, in looking and justifying utilizing resources from the Heritage and Civilization Fund for ostensibly budgetary support, nothing wrong with that, and to, of course, manage the fiscal requirements of the country, budget after budget, and where it becomes necessary, you dip into the heritage and civilization fund, because the prerogative was theirs. Let's face it, they were in the government. But to tell us at the end of just around 2024, to tell us that, listen, in one of his budget statements, I mean, it was amazing. It was enigmatic. It was discombobulating. Yeah, it was confusing. It was confusing as well as it was mysterious, yes, enigmatic. Because here it is. He is saying that the Heritage and Celebration Fund has reverted back to 5 billion US. That's what the man said. And he was beating his chest that it reverted back to 5 billion. Not recognizing and telling the population with a level of honesty and forthrightness that if he did not dip into the Heritage and Celebration Fund twice, then the sum that was extracted would have been the true number or the true value of the Heritage and Celebration Fund. In other words, if they had taken out, let's say the Heritage and Celebration Fund had 10 cents, and they took out 5 cents, and because of the built-in mechanism of the fund to invest in securities and other benefits to Trinidad and Tobago on the international stock market, etc., and the money grew back to 10 cents as a result of that. Not that they worked and they diversified the economy and new sources of revenue came in, you know. No, the Heritage and Celebration Fund is a self-generating facility that when it was conceived, it was designed for that. As we know, Norway has one of the largest sovereign fund, and I think Saudi Arabia probably the second largest. But how that fund operates is that there is a team of persons, experts, bankers, and people who are very familiar with international stock markets and investment and so on, and they will take the seed money accumulated as a consequence of that seed money, meaning that the money that was originally given to have it functional by the government that put it in place, and they will invest it there, and therefore the returns, the dividend, they will now, of course, add it to what is there, and then that is how it grows. Yes, that's how it grows. So it has nothing to do with Imbert, but listen to Imbert. He gives the impression that the government put money there because of their economic activities. You see, what he does and what they do develop this nag, as I say, this propensity to hoodwink, and sometimes the hoodwinking touches or affects or is intended to address multiple issues for deceptive purposes. Let me repeat. They generate stories, narrative around a particular topic to generate multiple deceptions. So when he says that the Heritage and Celebration Fund returned to the 5 billion that they met back in 2015, that Kamala Prasad Bisasa then and the UNC left for them, he then says it has returned to its original status, and clearly suggesting, if you are not conscious, suggesting really by that statement that no money was taken out. But he cannot say that. So what he has done, because that will be going beyond insulting our collective and individual intelligence. So what he does, he goes on to say it is back. The word back there suggests that something was depleted or something was taken out, something was extracted. So he says back to where it was. And in the process, somehow suggesting, without telling us how the money came back there, suggesting that it's because of the prudent management, when in fact is the less than prudent and malfunctioning and mismanagement of the resources of the country. And if it wasn't for the self-generating mechanism built into the Heritage and Civilization Fund, it could not have reached back there. But what is missing, clearly, I understand that there's an audio problem. I'm not seeing it reflected here. Let me just check and see to make sure. Yeah, we on, man. We on. We have at least the internal monitor working, so I could verify just in case somebody give the impression that we are not not audio oriented tonight. But the fact is that here it is. He went on to give the impression, if you are not discerning people, not only that the government somehow caused the money to go back there, but never mentioning how much was taken out, and therefore the real size of the Heritage and Civilization Fund, if those monies were there. That is dishonesty. You cannot characterize it any other way. You see, so that is the point I am making, why they are where they are today and will continue, of course, to what I consider degenerate politically, and eventually, of course, be relegated to the dustbin of political history because of that level of what I consider to be consistent deception and inability to be honest with the people. That is quite apart from the multiple non-disclosure clauses on very simple things, like the acquisition of vaccine at a time when our economy was decimated because of the pandemic. I agree with that. But in such circumstance where we were in a state of retrogression economically, there was a greater responsibility for the government of the day to be transparent and to account to the people and level with the people. But instead, whilst Guyana was telling its people how much money they paid for vaccines, Trinidad and Tobago's government was saying it was acquired with a non-disclosure clause. And we have seen that with so many other items in the oil and gas industry. We have seen it. We have seen it, of course, in very local arrangements. Like take, for instance, they don't want to tell us who are the people that consume, even though that is an issue, the most, and to whom it was given, the most foreign exchange in the country. And that is an obligation because the money belongs to all of us. And to tell us that the benefactor, the beneficiaries, not the benefactors, because the government will be the benefactor, the one who gives, but certainly the beneficiaries are scared about crime and the people going to kill them, etc., is ocious, irrelevant, null and void, and of no effect. That is our money. The same thing occurred with respect to lawyers that were feeding off the financial trough of the Ministry of the Attorney General. Same pattern of behavior. And that can only be considered to be secretive or clandestine government and governance. And that is not tenable. That is not acceptable in a democracy. That only occurs, go and talk to Maduro, go and talk to Putin. In countries and in scenarios where there is absolute rule and an oligarch or a dictator dominates the play and doesn't want the population to understand that they are part and parcel of the production processes for the acquisition of resources of the country, and they don't want you to know that because they feel they have an exclusive right, a high level of exclusivity, and therefore one of the mechanism to maintain that unique state of affairs is not to tell the wider population. Why? Because the wider population will become wiser. You know what I say? I say they are saying that as the PNM has, because the wider population would become wiser. They would see that the level of profligacy, the level of waste, the level of voluptuous living and the acquisition of the resources of the country, because they are there to treat with the public good, and when they live and act in luxury and of course generating an elitist agenda that says that only we can of course go to the United States, or our families can of course go to any part of the globe by resources courtesy the treasury of the country, which belongs to all of us, then you know that they are con men, they are mafia. There's a mafia syndicate operating in that society, and in this case Trinidad and Tobago, mafia style. You just have to watch at Balize House and understand the reality. Where the hell they get $100 and counting $1 million from, after of course the PNM was bankrupt when Rowley came into office in 20. He said so. So let us not waste time. He said so. So I'm not going to argue or in any way entertain any counter to that. He said so. And therefore, where they get all that money from to produce that monstrosity, that is blood money, our money, in other words, that they starved us of in order to promote their agenda. They alone must live nice, voluptuously, elegantly. Whilst, of course, we grovel and we welter in the decadence of poverty and despair and deprivation. Yes, indeed. That is what we are talking about here. We are analyzing, of course, progress. We are going to be celebrating, of course, Republic Day on the 26th. And therefore, we need to have an appreciation as to where we are and obviously who would have been responsible for where we are today. And if we are in a good place, then there are those who are going to be responsible for that. And if we are in a bad place, there are also those who will be. Because there is always, in human circumstance, cause and effect. Principles. Cause and effect. Principles. So the Heritage and Stabilization Fund has not, the saga of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund have not been completed in terms of totally narrated to the population because of the deception that the PNM has perfected whilst in government to exclude us, the ordinary person and the not so ordinary, from the affairs of state, because they believe once they get the tenuous mandate that they got in 2015, only 23 seats out of 41, and then 22 in the next iteration in 2020, of 22, so they will reduce further, and yet still act as though they have a mandate like Kamala Prasad Bissesa, the current leader of government in Trinidad and Tobago today, Prime Minister, with 26 seats. 26 seats. 26 seats, people. That is a mandate. That is a landslide. Not 22 and 23, and then they act as though they are dictators and what they say go. You have heard Rowley over the years. What I say go, I'm the best, the best salesman for Trinidad and Tobago. And everywhere he went was bubble after bubble. Bubble after bubble. Deception after deception. Every single major project in this country. And don't tell me you don't know. Don't tell me you're not aware. And don't tell me that you easily would, of course, put that behind you. No. Have it there for regurgitation, like a moment like now, so that we can compare and say, yes, Lennox, you are right, or no, Lennox, you are not right. But by and large, I'm sure that I have unanimous support, because the veracity of what I am saying and have been saying, not only can it be proven, but cannot be doubted or challenged. And I challenge anybody to address that matter, if you are PNM sycophant, or if you're Israeli, or if you are Ibsbert, etc. I know they're watching and so on, and they're saying that fellow from Laventille, he's trouble boy. That is all they could say. And notice, yes, I have not gotten anything from the contribution I would have made being a part of the coalition of interest, but I'm here every night, and I'm on the ground report every morning, because this goes beyond material and, of course, other accumulation of personal assets. It goes to the navel string, the umbilical cord of a nation that is yearning for good government, transparency, accountability, and as far as we can, based on ability, the equitable distribution of the country's resource. And if that is accomplished, then none of us, from the downtrodden to those in the upper echelons of the decision making, and of course I'm talking about industry, I'm talking about captains of industry, I'm talking about the well-to-do in the society, Trinidad and Tobago will obviously be a better place. Obviously, because there's more equity in the utilization and the deployment of the resources of the country. That is what is important to me. Yes, material, I had to eat, I had to drink, I have a family, I have this program to maintain. And I want to thank, of course, my good friend today when I asked for, as a consequence, are still not quite there yet in terms of the internet. We have two, what I consider to be bifurcated internet system here. And you wouldn't believe, in spite of my lack of financial resources, especially now, yes, especially now, prior to the 28th, I would have been financially much better off. Not because of the PNM, but because of the UNC. And of course the supporters and the nationalists that would of course be supporting the program financially. But if I am a regular supporter, well, no, I shouldn't go there. But what I would say, however, is that many of those who supported us over the last 9 years, they've either died, their circumstances have changed, and so they are right. If it is that which we advocated for and achieved. And it includes the acquisition and the manipulation, if you want to call it that, or the utilization of the financial resources, the treasury of the country. Then if I was a benefactor, a supporter of the program, apart from, of course, persons having their circumstances changed and some have died and some have fell sick and so on, and therefore their monies have to go there, I would also say that I did a good job. I supported them until this period, and therefore I think that now that they have achieved the objective, then of course alternative arrangements has to be made in order to sustain programs like this. That's all I'm prepared to say at this point. But I want to thank, of course, those who rallied. And what is it bifurcated? Internet supply that we have developed, but since we are here on George Street, well, one supply from B-Mobile, we pay for it, yes, supplies the immediate and the general community. So from George Street to Nelson Street and parts of Charlotte Street, they get a free supply of internet every night. All now, you see people outside there, outside this compound, and they are on the internet. So we have that. And then we have one for the program itself, which is a cable-based one, from Amplia. Same, let's say, holding company, but of course, two different strands of operation. One, so we have the cable from Amplia that we put in here. We got in here since we came here after the 28th of April, yes. And that had solved many of the internet issues that we would have had prior, but we were tenacious and we continued, of course, to persevere. Now, saying all that to say that not only is it an expenditure in itself where we have to find, but you understand that in spite of the reduction in support financially and the optimism that we will resurface, we will revive, we will, of course, I wouldn't say from the dead, so I wouldn't use the term resurrect, but certainly I would use the term to catapult us to the next level. Yes, we are going to be advertising. We are going to be engaging, of course, community-based initiatives outside of the studio and inside of the studio. So we have big plans. And you saw, of course, the emphasis on the young ones, starting with my son, yes. But every Saturday now, for example, we have another guest coming in to buttress him. And let's have those discussions. Why? Because we have to save those young ones from gravitating to the gang and the gang culture and the ideology that goes with it. And because they are young and vulnerable, they are more receptive, they are empty vessels, and they could be manipulated any which way. That is how those who are now mature or who have now become ingrained in that kind of activity, they were innocent as those that you would be seeing on the program. Of course, we will be highlighting some of them that are engaged. It's just that we wouldn't tell you for obvious purposes. And we will, of course, engage the parents. And we will engage the community leaders and the community activists and so on, and some of the altruists. And even, of course, those persons who are so inclined and want to, of course, don't mind being on air. We will, of course, want some of the contributors, financially and otherwise. And once they are so inclined, we will accommodate them on the program as well. So quite a lot to look forward to in spite of the initial financial constraints. But we expect that that will be resolved in the not too distant future. Not too distant is the operating word. Right? Yeah, the future is all, it could be tomorrow. The future could be, of course, next week, and the future could be next month. Whichever it is, that's a future, but it is not distant. A distant future, it may well be for some 3 years from now, 5 years from now, etc., etc. But no, I can assure you is a not too distant one, as described by myself earlier. All right, so people, of course, what's the time? The time is now, wow, 9:59. Why didn't you find a way to tell me that it's 9:59? People, of course, I trust that you would have gotten a good feel and feel much more comforted and comfortable, because you have people who are not only conscious of the national agenda, but is prepared to generate the paradigm shift by action. And this is one of them. And I trust that you got a full explanation as to the asinine, deceptive nature of that Heritage and Civilization Fund. Rowley nor Imbert has yet to tell us how much the Heritage and Civilization would have been if they did not take out. But to tell us that it gone back to where it was is rank and unadulterated, not just deception, but I think is dishonesty in public office. I don't think I would want to say anything more, except, of course, on Saturday we will examine in further detail the report of the SSA, the Strategic Services Agency, the spy element that Trinidad and Tobago has created in order to bring information of the type that they have to ward off, to preempt danger. But instead, the Rowley administration, in a spectacular display of abdication of ministerial and governance responsibility to Trinidad and Tobago, caused us to be in the quagmire that we have found ourselves, having not, of course, addressed these issues that were discovered. But resources were deployed, and we are yet to know where in totality. Have a wonderful rest of the night. God bless. To see you tomorrow morning on the ground report, Andy, Mikey, and myself, but certainly tomorrow night. No, I will be on my sabbatal. And as I said, let's go back to progress and get entertained if one or keep us to keep us on the straight and narrow by King Austin. I think he has the best tune for that purpose. Let me just make sure we have it here. In the meantime, let me play, of course, that of that Strategic Services Agencies report. So just in case you joined us late, I know that, of course, you still have it on record and you can pull it up at your convenience on YouTube. But let's hear it before we go. Yes, indeed. See, like it seemed like it reluctant to play, like it was too static behind me all this time. But that being as, let me see if I get Austin. If not, let's call it a day. Try to get Austin now. If not, no. That cling you were hearing earlier was a result of one of the hard drives giving some issues. So I will have to just uncharacteristically say good night. Have a wonderful rest of the night. God bless. See you tomorrow morning once again on the ground report, Andy, Mikey, and myself. And then on Saturday night, we will examine critically the report of the SSA. Very important for our understanding as to the challenges that are posed to the present government and the way forward in terms of policies in response and approaches in response to those challenges. Very comprehensive, and we need to know. Have a wonderful, again, rest of the night. God bless, and see you on Saturday. Don't forget, of course,